If you have not read The Message by Ta Nehisi Coates or anything by Ta Nehisi Coates, I need you to stop what you're doing immediately, well, after this video, and pick up this book, The Message by Ta Nehisi Coates. It is one of the most transformational reads you'll ever encounter. Hey y'all, my name is Taylor. I am the owner of Liberation is Lit, a bookstore that aims to spark collective change through promoting intersectional stories. And I'm here today with a annotation video. As you can see, I've got tons of tabs, but we are going to talk everything The Message by Ta Nehisi Coates, and we're going to finish off the video with some live annotation. So let's get into it. I read Between the World and Me by Ta Nehisi Coates back in, I want to say 2017 in grad school. I listened to the audiobook and I was just like, this book is amazing. Then I heard that The Message was coming out in October 2024. So I had to do a Rediscovery read of Between the World and Me before this baby came out. And I will give you the inside scoop too. So I was able to host an event with Ta Nehisi Coates thanks to my dear friend Mary Wood, who is a teacher at Chapin High School. She got in a lot of trouble in Chapin, which, for context, in South Carolina, Lexington County is very white, very conservative. And she is a white English teacher who was doing a unit on arguments. She used the book Between the World and Me to teach about arguments. And some parents in the district did not like that. So she got in a lot of trouble for teaching Between the World and Me, which ironically enough, she wasn't even talking about the racism point. She was just talking about how to craft an argument. When this got escalated to the school board, Ta Nehisi Coates actually came to the meeting in support of the teacher. And that is kind of where the book censorship that's happening in South Carolina really took off nationally, and South Carolina got a lot of attention for it. And so Ta Nehisi Coates writes a vignette about his time in Columbia in The Message. He reached out to Mary and was like, let's do an event in Columbia. And Mary connected to the publisher to connect to me to host the event. So I am super grateful for the opportunity, and I will post a picture of me and Ta Nehisi Coates from the event. And it was just such a wonderful night, and I really connected to the message that he talks about in this book. You may remember some of the controversy surrounding this book because he also talks about Palestine in this book and his experience. And not only talking about Palestine was the powerful part of this book, but his thoughts and experiences when he spent time in Palestine and Gaza specifically. And it talks about how he admits that he got it wrong. He used to believe things about Palestine that were very rooted in Zionism. And he talks about how a lot of Black people really connect to the Zionist struggle because we have always been an oppressed people, and that claiming of your own homeland and founding your own nation state is a very powerful narrative. But he also gives a warning, which he also does in Between the World and Me, talking about how when you have been the victim for so long, when you get to flip the narrative and become the victor, what everybody's searching for being that hero in their own story. And sometimes that comes at the expense of other people. And he talks a lot about what stories and what narratives that we are told, and how we can oftentimes use our stories as a tool of oppression because like I said, and like he says, everybody seeks to be the hero in their own story. And sometimes when we do that, we don't tell the whole truth about how we became the hero. I really love that aspect about this book. Another thing I really love is this book is for writers, and Ta Nehisi Coates is an author and a writer that every writer should study. Hence why Mary Wood was teaching Between the World and Me for a writing class and how to shape arguments. Ta Nehisi Coates is one of my favorite authors, one of my favorite writers who is able to shape an argument and seamlessly flow from one point to the next. And that definitely happens in the message as well. So let's get into what all of my tabs mean. So as you can see, I've got a lot of different colors and a lot of different tabs, and I wanted to tab everything, but I didn't want to run out of tabs. But I also ran out of tabs trying to tab everything. So I am a book tabber. I also love to highlight and write in the margins, and we'll get into the live annotation, but I love this book so much. About my tabs, you can't read any of what the tab says, but so the colors correspond to different things. This goldish color was every time I saw something about the message. And in the book, he kind of talks about the message, and I kind of framed it as the creation and the messenger. And he talks about the role of the writer and truth tellers. So this next slightly lighter goldish color is every time I saw a passage that referred to the role of the writer or the creator. I have these two tabs for the creation and the creator. And then this red tab right here is the role of the reader and just the role of stories in general. So you'll see that sprinkled out throughout the book. And then this bluish tab is, I call the haunting. So he has this passage about what parts of different books and different works and essays haunted him. He says, all I cared about was what haunted me and why. Slowly, I began to see the thread running through each of them. That really stuck out to me because me as a writer personally, I'm all about what kind of feelings can I evoke in readers. I'm an interesting reader too. I was reflecting on this the other day. Most readers, when they read, especially fiction, they see images and movies play in their head. That is not the case for me all the time. Yes, I can visualize a lot of what's happening, but when I am reading something, I read through feeling, and it's really hard to describe because when I was trying to describe to people like, oh yeah, I don't always see visuals in my head. That's why I can read horror novels and not watch horror movies, because my brain can just cut off the visualizations, but I can still be really in depth and engaged with the story. And I was just trying to figure out, why am I like that? Why is my brain like that? And how do I actually read? And I'm still trying to figure out how to articulate it, but I read in feelings. I read for the different emotions that a book will take me through. And then this book right here definitely took me through a lot of emotions. But I really think about that feeling connect with the writing, and how the haunting for me comes in. How do the words evoke emotions that haunt me or just linger in my mind and germinate something new? That was the bluish color. And then I always do a tab for questions. So any questions, especially in a nonfiction book, that they ask that are kind of rhetorical questions, but to use as like reflection questions, I tab with this green tab. So I usually call that tab questions over answers. So that's my tabbing system. So this book is broken up into 3 different sections, and section 1 is called Journalism is Not a Luxury, and that really talks about the role of the writer and the truth teller and how we have a responsibility to tell the truth over everything, no matter what kind of writing we do, journalism or not. The second section is about on pharaohs, and it's just about, again, that who wants to be the hero in our story, and talks about larger than life characters in the books we read, but also our historical figures. Section 3 is on bearing the flaming cross, and that really talks about the education system, the role of education, public education. And in this section, he also talks about his time in Colombia and his experience around the censorship around his book being taught. The final section is the gigantic dream, and this is where he goes in depth about his time in Palestine and how he has come to change his mind and his feelings, and just talking about the history and comparing it to Jim Crow here in America and racism against Black people. So this book was super powerful, and I am so fortunate that I got to meet him to get my little book signed somewhere in here. Yeah, get my little book signed. I really enjoyed the message. Ta Nehisi Coates is one of my favorite authors. If you haven't read The Message, Between the World and Me, he also has an essay collection called We Were 8 Years in Power, and that one includes the essay that kind of blew him up, or the case for reparations. And that was the book that he wrote extensively about Palestine and Zionism, and how he came to change his mind for this book. So highly recommend. I'll link all of the Ta Nehisi Coates books that you can purchase from Liberation is Lit. Here is me annotating a section from the book, and this can kind of give you an example of how you can annotate your books. I just like to include examples on annotations. I notice a lot of annotation videos talk about aesthetics of like colors and tabs and what pens you write with, but I really want to talk about the skill of annotation, and it's hard to do because annotation is so different from everybody, but I wanted to give an example of how I annotate my books.
I start by getting my materials. I use for pens a Sharpie, I think it's 0.5 tip marker. The smaller tips help you get more precision to write notes in the margins. And then a highlighter, regular highlighter, but you could get aesthetic as you want. I tend to highlight words and phrases that really stick out to me, but not necessarily whole concepts that I want to keep track of. That's when I usually use my highlighter. And I'm always writing notes on the sides of the page just to remember why that section stood out to me, or just what kinds of thoughts come up to me. When I write notes in the margins, it feels like I'm having a conversation with the text as I'm reading it. So when I go back, I can kind of think what was my mindset as I was reading the book. So I'm going through and looking for things that really stand out to me, new concepts or elaboration for concepts that stand out to me that I can keep track of later. And as you can see, I have undiagnosed ADHD, so I am reading ahead and then always going back, and then also writing notes in the margins about the things that I go back and want to re-experience again. And also when I am going through and making the annotations, I want to keep track of the tabs that I'm using. As you can see, I used the key to the tabs in the beginning of the book just so I can remember what color means what. I finally broke out the highlighter to highlight things that really stuck out to me that I want to revisit later, and writing a note to myself in the margins about what that means later.
So thanks so much for watching this video. If you want to support Liberation is Lit, there's several ways you can do so. You can buy books from our online store, liberationislit.com. We also have a Patreon page where I upload videos like this on annotations. I have like the social justice spark notes highlights on our Patreon page, in addition to a bunch of book club discussion guides and 10 takeaways, again, for people who want to harness the power of books but don't have time to read, even though audiobooks count as reading, and that's how I do most. If you want to support the community and local initiatives that we do, we have a Liberated YA book club where we bring in authors to Columbia, South Carolina to talk to high school students about different issues. I do book giveaways, I do free book swaps. If you want to support the local work that I'm doing, you can give to the Liberation Fund, and I will link all of that in the description. If you want more videos about annotations, book censorship news, and just social justice book recommendations, make sure you subscribe for the channel. And remember, through the lens of stories, we're going to make a difference in the world. Until next time.